Hey guys, and welcome to the American Tribune Live. I see we got some viewers coming in already. Look, this is a live show. I would love your comments. I respond to all of them as much as I can. We've got a great show today, and as we set this up, what we're trying to do is debunk the media lies and try to reach Democrat audiences. Yes, I'm a conservative American. I'm not speaking necessarily to the conservative audience, though. What I'm going to try to do in this episode is reach across the aisle and speak directly to you, the Democrat voter, as we go through just a small list of lies. I'm going to try to pick out the biggest ones that have really set the stage for the rest of the lies that they tell about Donald Trump specifically, but about conservative Americans in general. And we're going to do that with Charlottesville. Charlottesville, of all the hoaxes, is what set the table for all the other lies that followed. And you might have forgotten this if you're a conservative or a Democrat. You probably forgot just how thorough this lie has been. It's been told from day one in 2017. We saw it in the Joe Biden debate against Trump. We saw it in the Kamala Harris debate against Donald Trump. We saw it in Joe Biden's launch of his presidential campaign. The media is still pushing this. You can talk to Democrat voters out there that think Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people. So that's what we're working with. If you think Donald Trump called them fine people, everything else we try to communicate to you is not going to land. It's going to fall on deaf ears, because if you think he called them fine people, you believe all of the lies. So like I said, this show is for Democrat voters specifically. We've got to wake you up. And look, I don't think you're a bad person for voting Democrat. I think you're misinformed. I think you're supporting bad ideas, but we can vote for Donald Trump, or at the very least, you can not vote for Democrats to help save this country. That'll be step one. Stop voting for the Democrat Party. They are evil. They are disgusting. They're ruining this country intentionally. And as we go through the list of those disasters, Ukraine, open border, crime, what they're doing to your kids. California just made it illegal for schools to communicate to parents if there is a transgender identity circling among your youth. Illegal to talk to parents. So that's where we're at with Democrats right now. But again, this show is going to focus just on the Charlottesville hoax, just on a couple things that Kamala Harris has said in the last couple days, because it's endless. We could do a live show every day on the things Kamala Harris has said in the last 24 hours, but we're not going to do that. This show is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes long. We'll see if that works out. But again, thanks for joining us today, and let me know in the comments below what you think. What are some of the other lies that you have heard them tell about Donald Trump? If you're a conservative American, you're going to give me a long list. If you're a Democrat voter, that list is pretty short, but I hope to make it a little longer for you today here. So we're going to dive right into this. And again, as we set this up, it's not about you being a bad person. It is about you being misinformed and placing your enthusiasm for voting for Democrats. I see a lot of enthusiasm for voting for Donald Trump. I will admit I have never been excited to vote for Vor. I vote Republican begrudgingly. I think that's how a lot of us feel. We don't want a large government. We don't want these rhinos going into Congress, but sometimes we vote for the lesser of two evils. Seems like on the other side of the aisle, you vote enthusiastically for Democrats, but I don't know if you really have grasped or understand what you are voting for. You vote enthusiastically for endless wars overseas. You vote enthusiastically for big pharma, big government, military-industrial complex, taking your rights away as a parent and handing it over to the state. It just goes on and on here. But we're going to get to clips. We're going to show some clips of what Charlottesville was. And I got to set the stage. 2017, Donald Trump reacts to what happened in Charlottesville. And you've all seen the clip. Fine people on both sides. And if you watch MSNBC or CNN, that's as far as it's gotten. You saw Donald Trump call them fine people, and you were convinced Donald Trump was a racist. He supported white supremacy. And if you listen to Kamala Harris's campaign, white supremacy is still a threat in this country. Joe Biden called you, a white American, the biggest threat, the biggest domestic terrorist in this country. And that is all going back to Charlottesville here. So let us set the stage. Let me pull up a video for us all. A little trip back in time. Joe Biden, when he launched his campaign in 2019.
Charlottesville, Virginia, is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And there were
Let's pause it right there. Joe Biden in 2019, yes, he's already been called Hitler, but you hear it here overtly. Joe Biden referencing rhetoric you heard in the 1930s. Fast forward to where we are. Donald Trump has survived multiple assassination attempts. Democrats have not stopped the Hitler rhetoric, but they're going to tell you that you're the violent one.
By a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
All right, so that's Joe Biden launching his campaign in 2020 or 2019. He will say the same thing again at the end of his presidency. Let's take a look.
That I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields, carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas, were fine people? And this is a guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are.
All right, Democrat viewers, you've heard this before. Right now, you're probably a little emotional, like, I can't believe Donald Trump called them fine people. What in the world? But it wasn't just Joe Biden saying that.
Remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. Let's remember
Okay. Charlottesville from Joe Biden, Charlottesville from Kamala Harris. Yes, he called them fine people. Donald Trump supports white supremacists, apparently. We're not done. We've got Doug Emhoff, the first gentleman, recently saying something similar.
Jewish. Donald Trump says that if you're a Jew and you don't support him, you're not a good Jew. And throws out some of the biggest anti-Semitic tropes that have historically been thrown out there about dual loyalty and so many other things. What do you think about the anti-Semitism that we've seen not only over the past year, but have seen rising over the past several years?
Myself, we have been leading on pushing back on anti-Semitism, but just go back to Charlottesville in the Trump era.
Go back to Charlottesville. Let's see what Doug has to say.
Remember Charlottesville, the
Jews
tiki,
will not
Jews will not replace
us,
us, and that's when Donald Trump said, hey, there's fine people on both sides. The Tree of Life, murder, massacre.
Doug Emhoff saying that there were fine people on both sides. Do you see how easy it is to spread a lie? All you have to do is repeat it enough. And don't worry, at the very end of this montage, we will get to Donald Trump's own words. Don't listen to what Joe Biden is saying. Don't listen to what Kamala Harris is saying. Don't listen to what Doug Emhoff is saying. Oh, and you know what? While we're at it, let's take a listen to what Jake Tapper on CNN said at the time as well with Paul Ryan, Republican, right?
People have to stand up and speak out against this kind of bigotry so that it is never normalized, so that we don't give these people oxygen that they're looking for. They are the fringe. Let's keep them at the fringe. And that's why I think we have to have this moral clarity. And I'm pleased with the things he just said tonight to add clarity to the confusion that I think he gave us on Tuesday.
I think the issue that Eric was expressing is the reluctance to criticize President Trump for specifically saying things like very fine people were marching in that rally.
All right, get ready for the applause. If you vote for Democrats, no doubt you were clapping too, because good job, Paul Ryan and Jake Tapper, calling out Donald Trump's monstrous statement of calling white supremacists and neo-Nazis fine people.
Rally that had swastikas and anti-Semitic chants, and there were not any very fine people in that rally.
That's right.
And it wasn't morally ambiguous. It was morally wrong.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
what
so
the president.
Just notice how he frames it up as well. And this is a clip from 2017. This is shortly after the Charlottesville massacre. One person was killed. It's a tragedy. Watching those people go down the streets with swastikas, that is awful. Nobody supports that, least of all Donald Trump. We'll get to that comment in just a second here, but he frames it up as morally ambiguous. You're not supposed to think that Donald Trump said anything else, that there were fine people on both sides, and you're supposed to think that the only people marching in Charlottesville against the protests, remember, they were trying to tear down a statue of Robert E. Lee. They were trying to rename a park. They were trying to erase your history. No ambiguity whatsoever. Donald Trump called them fine people. Stop thinking about it. That's what he said. We showed you an edited clip. Just move on here. But it's funny how things change when you get a little bit of time. And once the 2020 election passed, once Joe Biden said it a little bit more, what gets really interesting is this isn't me saying Donald Trump was telling the truth. This isn't me, partisan Todd, saying, oh, Donald Trump can't be wrong about anything. Kamala Harris, just because she's a Democrat, I'm going to accuse her of lying. Take a look at this. Nobody paid enough attention to this headline from Snopes. Snopes is far left. Snopes does fact-checking for Facebook. Snopes even said, no, Trump did not call neo-Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. Of course, they're going to couch their fact-checking here. And note the date on this. The fact-check is in June. This is right before, and again, we got to set this up. This is right before Joe Biden went on stage against Donald Trump in his one and only debate. Hang on to that thought. We'll get back to the Biden debate in just a second, too. They had to couch it. They said, however, the accuracy of what Trump did claim, that there were very fine people on both sides of the 2017 Unite the Right debacle, is in question. You can't have it both ways. Either it's debunked or it's not debunked. Snopes clearly said he wasn't referring to them. And let's listen to Donald Trump himself as to why this is an incorrect statement. This is Donald Trump's full comments. And I want you to understand, as a Democrat voter, as someone that despises Donald Trump because you've been watching CNN or watching MSNBC, or you've been following certain accounts on social media, you have likely never seen this clip before. So I want you to be sitting down. I want you to be prepared to hear what Donald Trump actually said about neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Everything you just heard from Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Doug Emhoff, Jake Tapper on CNN, every other media personality at the time, every social media post you've scrolled through and liked because, yeah, Trump is bad. This is what Donald Trump actually said about Charlottesville.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than...
Did you catch that? Do we need to play it again?
And the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. Donald Trump able to look at a crowd of people and recognize that there might be 500 people on this Unite the Right side, 500 people marching down the street saying, don't tear down this statue, don't rename this park. There were probably people in that crowd, and we've seen the videos, there were with bad intentions. But for the media, for you to paint a broad brush against all these people and say, if you're there, you must be a neo-Nazi and white supremacist, That is on you. That is your bigotry shining through. You can have ideas opposed to Antifa of all groups and not be a bad person. And in fact, one of the things about Donald Trump's comments here about fine people on both sides, I would go so far as to say that that was incorrect, because I've never met someone from Antifa that was a good person. So the only thing Donald Trump got wrong is saying that there were fine people on both sides. There were not fine people on the other side of that rally. How about that? Donald Trump, though, neo-Nazis and white supremacists, totally condemned them. That's something that you hadn't heard at the time. And like I said, if you're voting Democrat in 2024 and you're listening to the debate with Joe Biden, the debate with Kamala Harris, there's a reason that they keep saying it, because people still believe it. Because when people hear Joe Biden and Kamala Harris call out Donald Trump for calling neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people, that makes them feel good. That makes them feel like they're on the right side of history. I'm going to vote for the candidate that condemns neo-Nazis. Donald Trump didn't condemn them. But guess what? We just heard Donald Trump say it himself. And if you don't want to believe Donald Trump, go to the Snopes fact check. They said the same thing. He didn't call them fine people. Don't know what else to say at this point. If you still believe the lie, that is on you. That is not on Donald Trump. There is so much more here as we're scrolling through this, though. When you talk about how the media lies to you, we're going to switch gears now. The border. The border is chaotic. It is wide open. Tens of millions of people are coming across. Kids are getting lost in the midst of this. Countless kids disappear. They go God knows where. Something happens to them, and it used to be an outrage. It used to be a point of concern, because take a listen to Stephen Colbert as he's talking about under Trump's presidency, losing several hundred kids. One is too many. Several hundred is a lot. And Colbert expresses some outrage here.
About the sheer number here, 545 kids. That's not a child on a milk carton. That's the whole dairy aisle. And yet there are still people who haven't made up their minds. There are still people who are going to vote for him. Maybe we feel too guilty to understand the magnitude of that crime and our responsibility.
And tonight...
All right, so hold that thought. Stephen Colbert, during Trump's administration, getting you emotionally outraged over the fact that kids have disappeared. And yes, Colbert is correct in the sense that we shouldn't lose any kids. We should know exactly every single migrant child coming across the border. We should know who their parents are. We should know where they are going. We should know that they are safe. Colbert is correct in that sense. We should be upset about that. I haven't seen Colbert talk about the latest stats under Joe Biden. Take a listen to this.
Lawmakers urging the Biden administration to provide explanations for the disappearance of 85,000 migrant children.
So now
85,000 migrant children. I don't have a calculator in front of me. I think we could probably do the math in our head pretty simply. What's that? 170 times greater. If it was bad that Donald Trump lost 550 kids, where is your collective outrage over 85,000? And I think I've seen figures as high as 300,000. Let's continue with Holly here.
Approaches 100,000 children, according to public reports, 100,000 children lost by your department and the Biden administration, migrant children sold into labor trafficking and sex trafficking.
We've never had such a bad problem with child labor trafficking and child sex trafficking, and it is enabled by the Biden administration's policies.
She didn't continue her thought, but those policies, do you remember how you got upset over kids in cages? You had AOC crying at the border. Everyone chanted kids in cages. Never mind the fact that it was Obama that built the cages. Trump used them. And it's not about putting kids in a prison cell. It's about making sure that kids, when they come into this country, are going to be released into the custody of their actual parents or guardians. I don't know why we have to spell this out so much. Are you saying as a Democrat voter, when you got upset over kids in cages, that you would rather have kids released into the interior of the country with just any adult? Are we saying that we're okay and that we're just going to trust these aliens crossing the border illegally, already criminals? You're going to trust a criminal when they say, Jose is mine. That little Maria over there, she's mine. Don't ask questions. Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of her very well. She's going to go to a nice, loving home. Are we just going to accept that? Colbert was upset over 550 kids. AOC was crying about kids in cages. And you haven't heard crickets about the 100,000 kids, according to Josh Hawley, that have now disappeared. 100,000 kids. I can't even wrap my head around that. I've got 2 little ones at home. If they were to disappear, my life would be over. Multiply that by 200,000 now. All these parents, all these kids, we don't know what's going on, but now that's okay, apparently. This is how the media lies to you. They get you emotionally triggered. They lie to you. They amp up your emotions. Donald Trump, Charlottesville, Donald Trump, kids in cages, Donald Trump losing migrant kids. They'll say it when it's about Donald Trump. Notice that you haven't heard a peep about it, though, when it's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's a big problem. All right, we have so much to get through here. Perhaps one of the other big lies that we can finish up with our show today. And again, if you're watching the show live, thanks for tuning in today. I see the numbers creeping up. Drop a comment here. Let me know your thoughts about how you have woken up as a former Democrat voter. You're saying, I can't take the lies anymore. Drop a comment in the chat if you're a conservative. You're saying, I have friends and family members, and I've had this exact same conversation. I showed them a clip of Donald Trump saying, I condemn them. I've shown them the clips of AOC crying at the border. And now I haven't seen tears from AOC in 4 years as we're losing hundreds of thousands of kids. Where is your outrage now? It leads me to believe that you're not outraged about missing kids. You're not outraged about just regular heritage Americans wanting to preserve their country. You're outraged about Donald Trump because that's how they frame it up. They want you to get mad about Trump. They don't want you to think about actual policies, Trumps that are good, Democrats that are bad, but don't think about the policies. Just get emotionally triggered when you hear the name Donald Trump. The other big lie we're going to get to, this is now current events. We've got to talk about Kamala Harris promising to do things now that she could have been doing for the last 4 years. Kamala Harris is acting vice president. Joe Biden himself has said, I tapped Kamala Harris to lead on every major decision. He made her the border czar. You're not allowed to say border czar anymore, but that's what she was. She was going to discover root causes, remember? But it's interesting, if you're going to be the border czar, if you're going to tackle the issue of illegal immigration, one of the best ways to do that, we've seen this with the Dominican Republic. They have a huge wall preventing Haitians from getting in. We have seen walls in Egypt along Rafah to make sure that Palestinians don't get into Egypt. Other countries around the world have massive walls. For some reason, we don't. And if you were to believe Kamala Harris when she said that, well, that's because that's a medieval vanity project.
Folks, on the subject of transnational gangs, let's be perfectly clear. The president's medieval vanity project is not going to stop them.
That's Kamala Harris campaigning, saying that we don't need a wall in this country. Walls don't work. Every other country in the world, they must be idiots because they built massive walls that prevent people from coming over, but we don't need a wall here. And in fact, if you want to build a border wall to secure this nation, and again, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country, that's a vanity project. Remember when Donald Trump wanted $5 billion for the wall and you said that was too much money? Just go look up how much we have given to Ukraine since that conflict started. Yeah, too much money. But suddenly, now that Kamala Harris realizes that her campaign is imploding, most Americans, I would include you as well, the Democrat voter, probably want a secure border because you look around and you say, my community doesn't look the same anymore. Crime is going up. I hear stories in the news about these poor young women getting raped and murdered. We should probably do something about that. And so, good thing we've got Kamala Harris coming to save the day. Take a look at this.
Former President Trump.
All right, we're a live show. Sometimes we make mistakes. That was the wrong clip here.
When I am president, it will be my day one priority to fight to bring down prices, to take on the big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging, take on corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families, to take on big pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans.
Yes, that sounds awesome.
All right, she's making so many good promises. She didn't mention the wall there. Let's get to, this is an ad from Kamala Harris now. That she promised to take care of your border. That medieval vanity project, just forget that she said that.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
So is Kamala Harris. It's weird how she's getting tough now, don't you think? She's been vice president for 4 years. We've had 10 million illegals come into this country. But she's going to promise you in January of 2025 that that's going to stop. You got to ask yourself, what version of Kamala Harris do you think you're going to get? The one that was campaigning against Donald Trump's border bill, the one that called it a vanity project, the one that's been vice president along with Joe Biden for 4 years to do something about it, hasn't done a thing. You're watching your fellow Americans heinously attacked, murdered in some cases. You've watched your neighborhoods get run over. Apartment buildings in Colorado are now safe havens for migrant criminals. But now she's going to get tough when she's elected president? I mean, if you're being honest with yourself, again, which version do you think you're going to get? The one that makes these promises or the one that you've seen in action already? And again, you don't have to take it from me, Todd Peterson. You can take it from CNN, which asked the same questions.
Tonight, K-File investigates. In a new report you'll see first out front, the K-File team scoured Kamala Harris's tweets and statements going all the way back to 2017. And what they found was more than 50 instances of Harris slamming Trump's border wall. But now, new Harris campaign ads actually showcase that very wall.
As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border.
And on top of critical tweets, Harris also wrote in her 2019 book, quote, "There was a bigger reason to oppose the border wall. A useless wall on the southern border would be nothing more than a symbol, a monument standing in opposition to not just everything I value, but to the fundamental values upon which this country was built. How could I vote to build what would be little more than a monument designed to send the cold, hard message, keep out?" Well, K-File's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now. So, Andrew, I mean, you all have gone through, scoured an incredible amount of material. Tell me more about what you found.
Yeah, that's right. We found more than 50 of those tweets criticizing the border wall before she used that in her ad. And I want people to take a look at just a few of what she said here. She called it wasteful, useless, a waste of taxpayer money, a vanity wall project, a wasteful border wall, a stupid wall, a medieval vanity project, and an unnecessary wall. And those are really just, there were more of this, just like 10 or like 50. But there was really a lot of this was the common refrain during the campaign. You read that quote where she said it was against everything that not only she stood for, everything America stood for, but she brought this up a lot. Take a listen to just one instance of that in 2019.
It's the president's vanity project.
His multi-billion-dollar vanity project called a wall is nothing more than a distraction from the fact that he actually hasn't focused on working people in America. He contrived a national crisis around his big distraction.
All right, so you go through all of that.
All right, we'll finish up with the CNN clip in just a second, but did you catch that? Kamala Harris doesn't have any mixed opinions about the wall. From the time she became a U.S. Senator to a presidential candidate in 2020 and now as vice president, her position has been crystal clear. Walls are the antithesis of what she envisions as the ideal for America. She didn't want the wall. She didn't want it because it was expensive. She didn't want it because she said it's not the symbol of this country. She didn't want a wall. Let's finish up.
You've got all the tweets, and yet all of a sudden in the ads, there's pictures of the wall. And then you went through to look at that wall. Like, what is that specific wall that's in her campaign ads now? And you found something very interesting about this specific portion of the wall.
And I think what's also really remarkable about this is, you heard her talking about it there, Trump's wall in his campaign during his presidency. There was really no greater symbol of Trump's presidency than the wall, in the way that Democrats were attacking him over the wall and his restrictive immigration policies. So we looked in that ad, and if you look at it, that exact area of wall is in Sasabe, Arizona, and that is a portion of wall that was actually built by Donald Trump. It was built in an area where there was not previous wall. It was actually pretty controversial.
Hey, happy day, everybody.
Oh, we had the wrong button there. I'm laughing because did you catch that part? Kamala Harris, after she railed against the walls, uses a Trump wall in her ad to promise you, and by promise I mean lie to you, the Democrat would-be voter, that she's going to get tough on the border and get tough on immigration. The Babylon Bee can't parody this any better. Kamala Harris, for the umpteenth time, does not want a secure border. She stands for everything against that. But because she's trying to buy your vote with lies, she will take a picture of Trump's own border wall, the one she railed against, and say, that's mine. I'm going to do more of that. I'm looking out for you, the American voter. As the show is titled, they lie to you about everything. This could not be a bigger lie. We'll finish up the clip.
When they were building it at the time. So just to see that, and then there are other.
She's using his wall that he built to say, look at what I did, basically.
And the other images of the wall, we weren't able to pinpoint, but there's telltale signs that that was a Trump wall because there's an anti-climbing plate on top that became popularized during.
I mean, you can't make this up. So, look, good for CNN for covering this. Honestly, if you didn't have the CNN cryon, or I hadn't told you it was CNN, if you're just listening on audio, again, Spotify, Apple, you can find the podcast in those locations as well if you just want to listen to it and not watch us live. If you didn't know that was CNN, this would sound like my show. Had I done my homework, if I had, quote, scoured Kamala's tweets, and I'd come up with all the language she used. I showed you the ad already here on the show, on the program. They covered the same ad. You would think this was my show calling out Kamala Harris. This was CNN. That's how bad it is for Kamala Harris. That's how awful her lies are when they have to debunk it. CNN doesn't want to run cover for Donald Trump, but they have to report it. But speaking of the media running cover for Donald Trump, and they don't want to do that, this is what The View had to say about the media's coverage. And more than Democrat politicians, I expect politicians to lie. I hope you would as well. Although, as I said at the beginning of the show, you vote enthusiastically for Democrats because you believe them and you want to believe them. I'm an adult. I know that politicians say whatever they need to get in office. That should be the mindset of every American voter. Take a grain of salt with any statement a politician makes. It is the media that is lying to you the worst, and it is the media that is creating your opinions. Yes, Joe Biden. Yes, Kamala Harris. Yes, Doug Emhoff. Yes, they all said the same thing about Charlottesville, but it was the media that helped push that lie to you. And now when CNN is covering Kamala Harris honestly and saying, hold on a second, she seems to have flip-flop on her border situation. This is what The View had to say about media coverage.
Something differently than President Biden.
Look, I think that Kamala Harris has been running a flawless campaign, and that's why she raised billions of dollars, $1 billion. I think it's because of the momentum that she has. I think it's because people believe in her, and I think people are.
All they do is lie to you. I'm sorry. We wanted to get to the part where they're actually saying the media needs to run cover for Kamala Harris, but when they tell you that Kamala Harris's campaign is successful because she has raised billions of dollars, just understand that if Donald Trump, and he has raised billions of dollars, but do you think they would report that the same way? Look, Donald Trump is popular as a candidate. He's raised billions of dollars. Do you know what they would say about Donald Trump if he did that, as he does that? Donald Trump is getting bought by these rich millionaire and billionaire donors, and this is why we need to tax them more so they can't donate to Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't a man of the people. He just takes big donations from these corporations and wealthy individuals, and he's just going to do what they want, and he's not going to focus on the little guy. But when Kamala Harris raises billions, suddenly it's a sign of her popularity. Do you think that you, the average American, the Democrat voter, how much did you donate to the campaign? Like $50 or the max $250? Like, those billions of dollars are not coming from average Americans, but they frame it up that way. Everything they say is a lie. This whole lie could be debunked. This whole clip could be debunked. Let's continue.
Showing that by the amount of money that they're willing to give to the campaign. I think we have the press to blame for a lot of this. About, Whoopi, you always say you don't believe in polls. I'm with you now because I'm reading the press. First it was Kamala's not doing enough press. Then she goes on this huge press tour. She was here with us. I thought she was fantastic. She was energetic. The crowd went wild. It was electric. CNN, Democrats grow anxious. Axios, blue wall blues. Fox, Dems are scared to death. No, Dems are not scared to death. Dems are pumped. What I would like the press to talk a little bit more about is Trump is in hiding. He didn't do the 60 Minutes interview.
Just understand how they are framing this up. Because they are reporting honestly, and look, if you are looking at what is happening honestly, Kamala Harris didn't do interviews or go on shows or do a lot of speeches or do a lot of press or go anywhere because she can't speak. If you watched her performance in the debate, if you watch her without a teleprompter, Kamala Harris can't speak. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She gives what is often described as word salad responses, and that's the best way to describe it. She uses big words to get through to your big feelings, but she never offers anything of substance. And so they were going to try to run a basement campaign a la Joe Biden in 2020, except they didn't have COVID to hide from. They couldn't use COVID as an excuse. So when Kamala Harris couldn't keep up the media manufactured momentum and hype and hysteria, her campaign had one of two choices: keep her hiding, and voters are looking around, they're saying, well, I don't know what I'm voting for, because what does Kamala Harris stand for? Like, I have all these old clips of her saying I'm going to do price controls, I want to take your guns, I don't want to build a border wall, Donald Trump's the bad guy, Charlottesville. So that's what they're thinking. They're like, well, that doesn't sound good. So her campaign was forced to put her out there because they had no other option. They were losing in the polls because they didn't see Kamala Harris. So the only other option was to throw her out there, and it didn't get much better. And when it didn't get much better, again, CNN had to cover it. Other people are reporting it. When you look at the polls and you see Kamala Harris's popularity going down, when you look at the betting markets and you see Donald Trump is surging in all the swing states, yeah, that is a crisis for her campaign. You've pulled out all the big guns. You got Barack Obama out there. You got Bill Clinton out there. You got the Hollywood celebrities out there. They're trying to generate interest and hype and get Kamala Harris back in there, but it's not working. And so the media reports that. But you're listening to The View, and they said, man, the media is doing a disservice to Kamala Harris. No, the media is doing what the media should be doing. They should just be reporting on what's happening. It is not the media's fault that nobody wants Kamala Harris. It is Kamala Harris's fault that nobody wants Kamala Harris. Or better yet, it's the Democrat establishment's fault that nobody wants Kamala Harris when they cooed out Joe Biden and installed her despite not having a single primary vote. Voters didn't want Kamala Harris in the Democrat primary in 2024. That is showing up now in the polls. That's showing up in lack of enthusiasm. This is on the DNC and this is on Kamala Harris. But you are hearing it here. I can't think of a better clip to describe how the media is what makes up your mind. If you vote Democrat, if you don't like Donald Trump, for the most part, that's because of how the media has framed up its coverage. Let's finish up the clip.
He does not want to do another debate. He's in mental decline. Obama.
I am speechless because I don't know how to say this nicely, too. Your concerns about Donald Trump's mental state, his mental health, his cognitive declines, you can't say that after supporting Joe Biden for 4 years. You just can't.
Speech was captivating in Pittsburgh, yet instead of talking about that, we're talking about what he said before the speech to black men. I think that the media has to do a much better job than what they're doing.
The media has to do a much better job. Translation, the media needs to run cover and run the campaign for and of Kamala Harris. That is all she is saying there. The media needs to do Kamala Harris's job. Let me say this again. It is not the media's job. It should not be the media's job to run a presidential campaign. That is the presidential campaign's job. It is the media's job, or should be the media's job, to simply report honestly and let viewers decide for themselves. Simply stunning clip here. But she said one more thing. I'm going to replay the clip in just a part here because I wanted to make one more comment.
I think it's because people believe in her, and I think people are showing that by the amount of money that they're willing to give to the campaign. I think we have the press to blame for a lot of this about, what you always say, you don't believe in polls. I'm with you now because...
Yeah, we have the press to blame for Kamala Harris's decline. It's almost like I could say we have the press to blame for how you feel about Donald Trump and the America First agenda. Take away the names of Donald Trump. I should have pulled up the polls here. They've done interviews on the street. They've polled people about just policies. They said, do you support policy A, policy B, policy C? When they put Donald Trump's name on there, people freak out. They're like, oh, I hate that policy. But if they take out Donald Trump's name, do you know what happens? People love the policy. and the only person to blame is the media. It is simply how you cover it. They've made you hate Donald Trump so much based on so many lies here. I'm going to finish up the show here. I got to read from Scott Adams. He runs a hoax list of Donald Trump. It is only because of what the media says about Donald Trump as a person that you hate him, but you actually love his policies. If you were to look at Donald Trump's policies without his name, look at Kamala Harris's policies without her name, you would look at that and say, my God, it is not even a hard decision. I'm voting for these policies over here. And then, peel off the tape and like, oops, turns out that's Donald Trump. Yeah, the media isn't doing a good enough job lying about Kamala Harris. That is all she is saying here. All right, we got to wrap this up. Our show is running long because, again, we're just trying to debunk like 2 lies. We tried to talk about Charlottesville and just some media coverage recently in the Harris campaign, and it's taking a long time to do that. Imagine if we had to do a live show on all the Trump hoaxes. I think we'd be doing a live stream for a week here. But here's the last thing Kamala Harris is campaigning on that we'll cover today, that she is going to, on day one, be a fresh change. And again, you got to ask yourself, where has this change been for the last 4 years? Like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they've had the Senate for the first 2 years of Biden's administration. They had the House as well. They could have done anything they wanted to help the American people, and they didn't. So when you vote Democrat, when you vote for Kamala Harris, I got to ask, like, why? What do you think is going to be different? Are you excited about her promise to stop this immigration crisis? Are you excited about her promise to stop the conflict in Ukraine? Are you excited to get prices down? I mean, they're the reason that these things are all happening in the first place here. But let's listen to Kamala Harris talk about, the bad guys. It's not them that's doing all this. It's those corporations that are price gouging you.
Because while our economy is doing well by many measures, prices for every...
Let me know in the comments below how the economy is doing well for you right now. By any measure, I'll take one measure.
Everyday things like groceries are still too high. You know it and I know it. When I was Attorney General, I went after price-fixing schemes. And when I am president, it will be a day one priority to fight to bring down prices. I will take on big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging.
Again, you got to ask yourself, you could do it right now, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden could sign something right now saying no more price gouging, whatever that means. And we can talk about that too. But why aren't you doing it right now? Kamala Harris, by all measures, is basically Joe Biden. They are interchangeable. They're both in control. I mean, you could say, I don't know if Kamala Harris is in control of her mental faculties or Joe Biden's in control of his continence, but they are the figurehead leaders of the United States. They could do something about this right now. Why are they going to do it on day one? Do it right now.
I will take on corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families. I will.
When it comes to the issue of, first you mentioned price gouging and these greedy corporations, most people that vote Democrat, certainly most of these Democrat politicians, have never run their own business. Tim Walz has lived his entire life in the public sector. He has never had to do profit and loss. He's never had to do payroll. He has simply collected a paycheck from money confiscated by you, the American taxpayer, first as a teacher, then as a congressman, then as a governor, now as a potential vice president. Tim Walz has zero idea how the economy functions. Kamala Harris, the same thing. Attorney General, Senator, Vice President. These are not people with real world economic experiences. So they look around and they say, well, gosh, Walmart or Costco or this grocery store chain, they have so much money now. They're making so much, record revenues, record profits. But the thing that they don't think about, and again, I don't know how they feel about this if they truly have no understanding. I'm kind of leaning that way. I think they are that dumb. Or if they're being that mendacious and malicious about the lie here. There is a big difference between revenues, the revenues you generate, that's all the money coming in, and then the leftover profit, which is what you get after you pay your employees. You have to pay for the merchandise you sell. When Walmart sells something for $2, they don't have a $2 net profit. Let's say it costs 50 cents for them to purchase that from the manufacturer, and then they had to pay wages to employees that helped you check out, or employees that stocked it on the shelf, or the truck driver that brought it from the ports into their local store. There are a lot of costs associated with running a business. And so when you factor all of that in, forget what the record revenue is. you need to look at their margins. In places like Walmart and Target, they're operating on like 2 or 3% maybe margins, which means that record revenue basically disappears. They are operating at the smallest margin of profit possible. And when Kamala Harris talks about, I'm going to do price controls to stop their price gouging, basically what she's saying is these companies won't be able to operate at a profit at all, and they will have to close. Everyone talks about how it's so hard to run a restaurant or open a restaurant. Most restaurants close within a couple years. That's because the margins on restaurants are insane. You've got to pay for your food, prepare your food, pay for the restaurant building itself if you own or rent it. You've got to pay your employees. You have to do all sorts of stuff. At the end of the day, it is hard to run any sort of business because you have expenses. Kamala Harris, Democrat voters have no idea on that side of running a business that there are expenses. Yes, it's important to bring money in, but it's more important to make sure that you bring more money in than money that you have to send out to buy your goods, get those goods transported, pay for facilities, pay for employees. There's so much more going on here. And then she talks about rent. Look, if you're lucky to own a home right now, good for you. If you're renting right now and your rent goes up, that's because your landlord has to pay interest on his mortgage, has to pay increasing property taxes. The cost of fixing things is going up because what you need fixed is expensive to replace, and who you pay to fix it is getting more expensive too. It's not that these greedy landlords, these greedy corporations are just looking at you as a fool. I'm going to milk this guy for all he's worth. Yes, that happens, but by and large, we're not going to make rules based on the exception. The rule is everything is more expensive right now. And so if businesses, if landlords are going to run at a profit and make their business survive, unfortunately, they have to pass the costs on to you. That's how this works when you print trillions of dollars at the federal level and you see inflation go up. Everyone is trying to keep up with inflation.
Take on Big Pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans.
And there it is. This is the last thing we're going to finish on today. She talked about prescription drug prices. This is another huge lie. No doubt, if you plan on voting Democrat or have voted Democrat in the past, you will hear that Joe Biden brought down the price of insulin to $35 for a month's supply. 35 is the magic number for insulin, apparently. But take a look at this. Let's go back to this headline here. It might surprise you to learn, Democrat voter, that Donald Trump announced lower out-of-pocket insulin costs for Medicare's seniors. Donald Trump, under his presidency, let's find the sentence here. I got a long clip. If you're watching out loud, I don't want to read all this here for you. Medicare beneficiaries will get access to a broad set of insulins at a maximum $35 copay for a month's supply. Donald Trump lowered insulin costs. That's number one here. I got 3 slides to show you. Do you understand, Democrat voter, what happened when Joe Biden took office? Number one, he negated all of Trump's executive orders, most famously getting rid of the Keystone XL pipeline, which made energy costs go up because here was a cheap way to transport oil from Canada. But take a look at this. Here's a CNN headline. This is from February of 2021, shortly after Biden took office. This is CNN's headline. Biden freeze, this is a price freeze, hits 2 Trump Doug price rules. CNN reported it. At least they wrote it on their website. I don't remember a lot of coverage on their media or on the cable news programs. Joe Biden put Trump's, let's go back to Trump's plan. Donald Trump, $35 insulin. Joe Biden put a freeze on that. He said, nope, we're not going to just have people pay $35. Insurance companies, doctors' offices, corporations, you can charge a lot more for that. And people on Medicare, people that need that for their diabetes, they will just pay more out of pocket. And then Joe Biden, because he set the bar really high again, decided that as the election was nearing, he could become the hero because he knows that you, the Democrat voter, have a short-term memory. Here we go from 2023. President Biden's cap on the cost of insulin could benefit millions of Americans in all 50 states. And take a look at this. You can't make this up. As part of President Biden's historic Inflation Reduction Act, look at that, he tied it into the IRA. Nearly 4 million seniors on Medicare with diabetes started to see their insulin costs capped at $35 per month. Folks, Donald Trump did that already. Joe Biden took it away, and now the only thing you will remember, or the only thing that you know about, is that Joe Biden brought those costs back to $35. And isn't it amazing? Donald Trump's plan was $35. Joe Biden got rid of it. And then Joe Biden brought it back to $35. And when you think of insulin costs at $35, no doubt you are giving Joe Biden credit for that. You can't make this up. All right, I think we got to finish up with one more clip here. Let me find that. The last lie we'll focus on because there's just so much. And again, this is not to attack you personally if you're a Democrat voter. This is to simply enlighten you and try to expose you to just a snippet of the media's lies, the Democrat politicians' lies towards you. Everything you know about Donald Trump is a lie. Everything you know about Donald Trump's policies are a lie. And when you take away the name of the candidates, like I referenced earlier, you're going to like Donald Trump's policies more. If you took away the names of $35 insulin, you'd be like, that's a great idea. Turns out you have to give credit to Donald Trump. If you take away the names of the candidates, because right now they're both campaigning on a strong border position, you would have always supported Donald Trump's policies. Kamala Harris is pandering to you. If she wanted to build a wall, she wouldn't have critiqued Donald Trump. She would have done it the last 4 years. She is simply pandering to you because that's what polling shows she needs to do. But this one is too good.
Not being transparent with the voters. He's not being transparent. So check this out. He refuses to release his medical records. I've done it. Every other presidential candidate in modern era has done it.
I don't know about you. Well, I'll fill you in, voters. I work with a business called the American Tribune. That's why we call our show the American Tribune Live. We have 15 Facebook properties with anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million followers. We run several Twitter accounts. We've got several Rumble channels. We've got a YouTube channel. We're all over social media. When we would describe, or we would write articles on our website, theamericantribune.com, when we would post videos on our Facebook pages, just from C-SPAN, it's public access, public domain, so there's no copyright, of just Joe Biden kind of like shaking or looking lost or doing his thing, we would get fact-checked. We would get fact-checked because Joe Biden was perfectly fine. You heard for 4 years that Joe Biden was healthy. He wasn't demented. He didn't have early onset Parkinson's. Joe Biden was completely healthy. Kamala Harris told you, Joe Biden is fine. I trust him. Nancy Pelosi going out there. MSNBC, we did clips on our other podcast, Freedom from the Press, which I do with Jason Robertson. J-Rob from Minnesota is his Twitter handle every Friday. We have clips from MSNBC with Morning Joe saying, like, this is the best version of Joe Biden ever. And that was in, like, April of this year. Fast forward to June, Joe Biden goes on the debate stage. And do you remember what happened? Suddenly you were allowed to talk about Joe Biden's dementia. Suddenly Facebook wouldn't fact check or censor or suppress or nuke our pages for showing C-SPAN videos of Joe Biden doing Joe Biden's thing. It was all media coverage. The truth was always there. Joe Biden was always not well, but you weren't allowed to say it until the media gave you permission. And so Kamala Harris here, she is saying with a straight face and with people applauding her apparently, that Donald Trump is the bad guy in this situation because he won't release his medical records. This is the same woman that covered up Joe Biden's senility for nearly 4 years. And now, as I talked earlier, I said I wanted to get back to the Joe Biden debate. Joe Biden did a debate in June because they needed to get rid of him ahead of the Democrat convention. They needed to get rid of him with enough time left for the media to manufacture hype. And again, it is all manufactured hype about Kamala Harris. She dropped out of the 2020 presidential campaign with less than 1% before she even got to California, her home state. Nobody in California wanted her as president, even though they elected her senator. Polls consistently showed that Kamala Harris was not a popular vice president because what did she do? What has Kamala Harris done as vice president other than check 2 boxes of black and woman? I remember a lot of hype when Kamala Harris got into the White House. We got our first black female vice president. That's not an accomplishment. She didn't do anything to earn black skin, female genitalia. She's just a black woman. That's not an accomplishment. She hasn't done anything. She has made this country worse. She's enabled tens of millions of illegals to come into the country. She's allowed crime to run rampant in major cities. She's sent hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and gotten Ukrainians and Russians slaughtered in the war machine. She hasn't actually done anything as vice president to help you. She promoted the Inflation Reduction Act, which made inflation just go through the roof. She hasn't done anything. But she's going to tell you that Donald Trump, because he isn't releasing his medical records, can't be trusted now. This is the woman that lied to you about Joe Biden. And again, when we talk about the June debate, let me go back to that too. They did the debate in June. It had never happened before where you have a presidential debate ahead of both major parties' conventions. They only did that because they needed to expose Joe Biden for what he was, old and senile, and give the DNC, give the machine, give the media time to run cover for a new candidate. That is all that was. Kamala Harris didn't get a single primary vote. You didn't vote for her to be the presidential candidate, Democrat voter. They didn't let RFK in. They didn't let other candidates in. Nobody wanted her. They said Joe Biden's the guy. That's how the primaries went this past year. And then when Joe Biden was too old, he was losing in the polls, they said, we got to shake things up. Do the June debate. Get Joe Biden out of there. Have everyone excited at the DNC for Kamala Harris to be the new candidate. Give the media a couple months to spin up some stories about her, about how great she is. And again, think back to the clip on The View. The media, that is the media's number one job. They're going to run the campaign for these candidates if they're a Democrat at least. But my goodness, Donald Trump's not releasing his medical records, but I lied for 4 years about Joe Biden's senility. All they do is lie to you. And I got to wrap up the show here. We are coming up on an hour. And if you've been here the whole time, thanks for tuning in. It's been a blast going through some of these lies with you, hopefully changing some minds here. I promise like 20 to 30 minutes, but there's just so much to get through here. I want to finish with this. This is just an introduction to the lies that the media is telling you. If you watch CNN, if you watch MSNBC, my goodness, if you even watch Fox News, you're not getting told the truth. They will lie to you about actual things that happened. I think we did a good job explaining that with the Charlottesville hoax. They do a good job of lying to you, though, by excluding major stories as well. They're not going to tell you about the 100,000 kids that are missing. They'll only tell you about 500 when that happens under Donald Trump. They're not going to tell you about the border situation being awful, unless it's with Donald Trump, and then something's going on there. But Kamala Harris is going to fix the border. It's a strong economy, but if you elect me, I'm going to make it a strong economy again. The border is fine, but if you elect me, I'm going to fix the border problem. You can't hold both of those thoughts at the same time. My plea to you is this. Tune into the show, share the show with your friends, do a little homework on your own, and don't vote Democrat. You don't have to vote for Donald Trump right now. By the end of maybe watching the show for a couple of weeks, tuning into some other conservative media outlets, maybe you'll see that Donald Trump's not the bad guy he's made out to be. But at the very least right now, reconsider your vote for Kamala Harris. If you vote for Democrats, none of the promises they tell you about getting prices down, getting the border solved, ending the war in Ukraine, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen. It's only going to get worse. Withhold your vote from Democrats. That's my plea at the beginning. Stick around with us long enough, and hopefully you'll be voting for Donald Trump in the next month here. But folks, thanks for tuning in. We got to stop the show before we hit the 60-minute mark. Again, this is the American Tribune Live. I am Todd Peterson. You can check out all of our properties. You can go to our website, theamericantribune.com. You can head over to YouTube and Rumble and find us at the American Tribune. And if you really want to get into some deep stuff here, this is scratching the surface. This show is designed to appeal to Democrat voters, talk about mainstream issues, talk about stuff in the news, talk about how the media lies to you. But if you want to get into the weeds, you can head over to theamericantribune.news. Again, we got a website, theamericantribune.com. That's where you're going to get more mainstream stories. But if you go to theamericantribune.news, I hope you're sitting down as you're reading that. But we are getting out of here, folks. Again, thanks for tuning in. We covered so much ground today, and it still feels like we just scratched the surface. But we'll be back. We're here Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Central. Hope to see you in 2 days' time. Otherwise, have a great day.